Ik kom van Zuid-Afrikahuis. Ik heb hier 2 cursussen Afrikaans gedaan. Naar Zuid-Afrikahuis, we gingen naar Pretoria. De rest van de wereld is naar Holland gekomen. Want mijn pa heeft hier als vlieg. Maar die meeste opgerichten van mij, uit mijn jeugd als ik klein was, dat is allemaal in Zuid-Afrika. En ik was er nog zo oud. Zuid-Afrika. En het is helemaal en ik heb gedacht, het is zo probeer ik nou aan de first misschien daarom heb familie is. Mijn moeder komt van die, wij maken van Westland. Wat in Holland verdwenen is. Alma, mijn man nog gebruikt is begonnen, platje, en ik denk.
Dames en heren, dames en heren. Welkom in het Zuid-Afrikahuis in Amsterdam, deze prachtige zonnige dag. Ik weet niet of jullie allemaal het Zuid-Afrikahuis kennen, maar het Zuid-Afrikahuis is het kennis- en cultuurcentrum van en over Zuid-Afrika in de lage landen. Dus niet alleen in Nederland, maar ook in België. Zo stellen we ons altijd voor. But I'll continue in English. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, in the Zuid-Afrikahuis in Amsterdam. The house, as we call it, is the cultural and knowledge center on South Africa in the Low Countries. It houses a library, archive, extensive archive from the end of the 19th century, and we organize cultural events and activities such like this. Welcome to our panel, and welcome to our to the people who are in the panel on a conversation on, and this is the title of tonight, Higher Education, Building a Bridge Between the Netherlands and South Africa. A warm welcome to our special guest, and there he is, the rector of Stellenbosch University, Velveers. Welcome, welcome. Unfortunately, he cannot join us in person, but luckily he will participate online. And I see there's no load shedding going on at this moment. We are very pleased to have the opportunity to talk about important issues such as knowledge circulation and exchanges between South Africa and the Netherlands, as well as to talk about the experiences of the panel members. That's why they are here, that's why they are invited, but also with you, the audience, the alumni of Stellenbosch University on these matters in higher education. I'll keep it short. Our moderator, Mervyn Bakker, he will introduce our panel guests, and besides Velveers, we welcome Nicholas Clark, Alvira Fischer, and Margriet van der Waal. And Mervyn will, of course, enlighten you further on the theme of tonight. And this panel was organized in cooperation with the Development and Alumni Relations of Stellenbosch University. Thank you so much, Alison April, for all the work and effort you've put into this event. Before I give the floor to Mervyn or Mervyn, let me introduce him, or else no one else will do, so I'll introduce him. Mervyn Bakker is Director International Strategy and Relations at the University of Groningen. His expertise is internationalization of higher education. And before he joined Groningen University, he worked as Regional Director for NUFIC's MESO in Indonesia and South Africa. But he's also a board member of the Stichting Studiefonds Zuid-Afrika and I didn't know that, Mervyn, the Indonesia-Netherlands Society. Mervyn, the floor is yours, and enjoy.
Thank you, Angelique, for this excellent introduction, and great to see so many of you on this beautiful evening in Amsterdam. I have the honor to introduce the panel and also the topic a little bit, and having worked for the Netherlands Education Support Office in Pretoria, I've been heavily involved in making the bridge and making the connection between South Africa and the Netherlands in higher education. That relation in higher education between the two countries is long-standing and multifaceted. A lot of things are happening between South Africa and the Netherlands, student exchange, PhD collaboration, double degrees, joint degrees, projects, research, you name it, and things are going on. If you look at the balance in the relation, then that's maybe another story, maybe also something that we can address tonight. For Dutch students, South Africa is the 6th most popular destination country on a yearly basis, and these numbers are pre-COVID, but on a yearly basis around 1,400 Dutch students find their way to South Africa mainly for exchange and project work, not so much for full degree students, so that's 1,400. The other way around, from South Africa to the Netherlands, we don't have the numbers of the exchange students and students involved in projects, but we do have numbers of degree students. It's around 200. And you see there's an issue of balance, I would say. We are working together with the governments and universities to see what we can do to bring more reciprocity into the relation. For example, through the Holland Scholarship Program, a scholarship program from the Dutch government, not very large in scale, but still it allows Dutch students to go to South Africa, but also South Africans to come to the Netherlands. As you already mentioned, our very own study fund, South African Students Organization, that is affiliated to the Zuid-Afrikahuis, and on a yearly basis, also very small, we bring about 10 South African master's or PhD students for a short period to the Netherlands, as part of their degree in South Africa, to study here. A slightly bigger initiative, also worth mentioning, I think, is the program between the NRF and NUFIC. It's a PhD program where both sides basically fund the South African students to do a PhD at a South African and Dutch university at the same time. And I personally am a big fan of that program because it also allows for sustainability of the relation between the universities involved and really on an equal relations. Well, the list goes on, but I won't take much more of your time. Perhaps one thing is worth mentioning, and I think the representatives of the South African embassy here are already aware of that. Very soon at the Dutch embassy in Pretoria, an education and research attaché will be appointed, and I think that shows at least the interest of the Dutch government in sustaining and in intensifying the relation between South Africa and the Netherlands. So that's the topic of tonight. We're going to talk about the bridge that already exists, but I also think about the obstacles we are still facing, and hopefully together with you and the panel here, finding some solutions, maybe, or at least first steps towards solutions in making the obstacles go away. Angelique already introduced the panel, so we agreed that I would do that, but that's not necessary anymore. Later on, when I give you the floor, there's plenty of opportunity to further introduce your own perspective and also your background. But thanks for being here, Margriet, Nicholas and Elvira, and I really look forward to make it a great panel. As said, over to our main guest, Professor Wim de Velveers. I don't think you need any further introduction than just saying that you are the Vice Chancellor and Rector of Stellenbosch, and I think the alumni here are very eager to hear from you what your perspectives are on the topic of tonight.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mervyn and panel members. It's a real pleasure to interact with you this way. To be able to do it, it's very unfortunate that I can't be there in person, but goeienaand aan almal daar. Dis lekker om toch so met julle te ontmoet. It's a pity that I can't be there, but as stated, there was some unforeseen circumstances. So I've got about 10 minutes, and then we'll get into the panel discussion and some other perspectives. But the topic, building a bridge between the Netherlands and South Africa, it seems somewhat superfluous, as you stated, Mervyn, in that there is already very, very strong links between South Africa and Stellenbosch University and the Netherlands by virtue of our past, shared past, language and culture. So it's really what can we do to describe some of the existing links, but also how to strengthen the existing links. So I was in Europe very recently and had to come back for a meeting, important meeting today. But just to give you a flavor of some recent visits that I had overseas, which really speaks to some of the strengths of Stellenbosch University. And the point that I want to make is that your alma mater is doing well, and that Stellenbosch is rising, and you can be very proud of your alma mater. And when I travel, I visit various institutions, I visit foundations, I visit with alumni, and of course I'm also the chief fundraiser, the main fundraiser, so I visit with high net worth individuals to support our university. But most recently, I visited the United States of America, and we renewed a bilateral agreement with West Point Military Academy. So we're the only university in South Africa that has a Faculty of Military of Science. I visited Florida State University in Tallahassee, Florida, and then moved to Phoenix, Arizona, where we visited Arizona State University, and then on to Northwest University in Chicago, George Mason University in Washington, D.C., and then moved to Brussels, where Alison April is based, and had a fantastic visit with Ghent University, a day-long visit, and they really have a preferential partnership with us, a comprehensive partnership, as is also the case with KU Leuven. And then visited the EU there, and then went to Paris and visited SCHEMA, the SCHEMA Business School, and then on to London to visit Imperial College. You spoke about Stellenbosch University and Dutch exchange students at Stellenbosch University. So of our current 32,000 students, we have 22/3 of them are undergraduate and 1/3 postgraduate. But we have, now I'm talking COVID, we have more than 4,000 international students. 60% of our international students come from Africa. So predominantly it's between Namibia and Zimbabwe that they exchange positions number 1 and 2. Now pre-COVID, number 3 used to be Germany. So about almost 600 German students annually, and a large number of them come and do their LLM, Masters in Law degrees at Stellenbosch University. But over the last 18 months or so, a very large number of French students from Schema, a business school, doing their studies in BBA, Bachelor's in Business Administration, and also Master's in Business Administration. So you will hear quite a bit of French being spoken in the streets of Stellenbosch again. I must say it looks like I saw some people turning up there or sitting down with glasses of wine, but I don't see the panel members with any glasses of wine. I hope at least the wine's from Stellenbosch. So, but the point is, on this visit, which unfortunately was interrupted a bit, I visited, there was a French university, South African Universities Week in Paris to really promote collaboration between French and South African universities. I also visited Brussels, and I would have loved it. Mervyn and you were going to be my host at the University of Groningen today, actually, to also explore this very significant links that we have with Groningen and to expand this into a comprehensive partnership portfolio. But as you've mentioned, so Stellenbosch University actually has it's some of our oldest bilateral partnerships are with universities in the Netherlands. With we have 17 formal bilateral partnerships with Dutch institutions. One of the oldest is actually the University of Leiden, and just coincidentally, my father, who used to be the dean at the Faculty of Law, obtained his PhD at the University of Leiden in the late 50s. So we have a significant number of links, and as you all stated, some of the very important links that we have are in the STEM field: science, technology, engineering, mathematics, but also the arts and social sciences. And in a sense, what I'm very much pushing, and what you is joint PhD programs. So we have existing programs with 24 institutions worldwide now, where Stellenbosch University has joint PhDs. And the other part that I'm really very keen on expanding is our postdoc program. So when I started as Vice Chancellor about, what was it now, 1st of April Fool's Day 2015, we had about 70 or so postdocs in the university, and now we have almost 400. So we're a research intensive university, and I really want to push this number up to about 600 as soon as possible. And the one mechanism to do that, and that perhaps what we can also discuss tonight, is a joint postdoc program where there will be two institutions, two supervisors. There will be time spent in each of the respective institutions, and it can also be jointly funded. Just to boast a little bit about Stellenbosch University, to make our alumni feel proud, just 5 quick things, or 6 quick things, is that we despite COVID, we completed our academic years 2020 and 21 successfully, with record number of qualifications and also including PhDs. But 5 recent developments at Stellenbosch is, one is that 2 years ago we founded a school for data science and computational thinking. So this is a cross-cutting, multidisciplinary school that really explored both the science of data science and the applications of data science. And this is actually this beginning of this year, we started with a BSc, Bachelor of Science in Data Science, and it's proven very popular. Also a Bachelor in Engineering with a focus on data science. So this is where we can get the interactions with biotech, with fintech, and with agri-tech, because we have a really very strong faculty of agricultural sciences. The second one is also aligned to that, is that I recruited Professor Tulio d'Oliveira in July last year, and he may be known to you as he and his team, they described the beta and Omicron variants of COVID. And he was named as one of Time's 100 most influential people in 2021. So extremely productive, and he founded the Center for Epidemic Response and Innovation. And this led to the third point that I just briefly wanted to mention, is that the Director General of the World Health Organization, Dr. Tedros Ghebreyesus, and his team visited our medical campus earlier this year to announce the establishment of an mRNA vaccine hub development center here, and Stellenbosch is really in the middle of that. The last 3 points is we were asked to join the global alliances of universities on climate, and this is led by Tsinghua University and Imperial College, and it's about 13 or 14 other universities in the world. It's the usual culprits: Oxford, Cambridge, UC Berkeley, MIT. It also includes the National University of Singapore, the Australian National University, Sciences Po, and Stellenbosch University was the only university on the African continent that was asked to join this network. It's called GAUC, Global Alliance of Universities on Climate, and that resulted in us establishing yet another school, a multidisciplinary cross-cutting school. It's the School on Climate Studies. And that's also resulted in us recruiting most recently an A-rated scientist in the Professor Francesco Petreccioni, who is the foremost quantum computer scientist in South Africa, and he has joined us recently, and he's heading the National Institute for Theoretical and Computational Sciences. Last one is that, as you know, at Stellenbosch University, we have STIAS. STIAS is the Stellenbosch Institute of Advanced Study. It is co-funded by the Wallenberg Foundation from Sweden. It's the only institution outside of Scandinavia that they fund. And this relationship is now that resulted, and the Wallenberg Foundation's relationship with the Nobel Foundation has resulted in the Nobel Foundation for the first time ever outside of Scandinavia sponsoring the Nobel in Africa Symposia. And they're going to do this for the next 10 years. And annually, COVID put a bit of a spanner in the works there, but it's finally kicking off this year with a week-long symposium in October starting with physics. And so we have 5 Nobel Prize winners signed up to come to Stellenbosch. I will give them some wine. And this will be followed next year on chemistry. There'll also be one on cardiovascular medicine and economics, and then we're also hoping to get one on literature, and then the Nobel Symposium on the Peace Prize that's provided by Norway. Just coincidentally, the most recent winner of the Nobel Prize in Literature finished or worked on his latest book whilst he was a fellow at STIAS in Stellenbosch in 2019. So I just wanted to start off like that to tell our alumni that they can be proud. Your alumni of your alma mater is a top 1% university in the world, and we're certainly I regret not being able to visit Groningen today, but that it's high on my list when I come back again, Mervyn. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your inspiring opening words. I see a room full of very proud alumni here. They're all smiling, and not because of the wine, but because of your great introduction, Rector. Thank you very much. Let's hit the ground running and go to the panel. And I would like from each of you a brief reflection on what your perspective is. Can be from a personal or professional perspective on the collaboration between South Africa and the Netherlands. If you allow me, Margriet, can I start with you, Professor Margriet de Waal. She's currently professor at the University of Amsterdam on behalf of the Zuid-Afrikahuis, also assistant professor at the University of Groningen, not alumna of Stellenbosch but of UJ. The very strong roots in South Africa and also in the relation between South Africa and the Netherlands. Margriet.
Thanks very much, Mervyn, also for the invitation to say something here. I feel very much welcomed in this context with all of the Stellenbosch people over here. But it's nice to be saying something about my experience, having lived and worked in the Netherlands for the past 22 years, more or less, in the academic context, about what I see as characteristics of the building bridges aspect and question that we want to discuss this evening. Working in the university, of course, makes that my emphasis is very much on teaching and research, and I think that is really where a lot of the exchange and bridge building should happen. Of course, we speak and have experience of broad international framework programs that the European Union finances. Think of Erasmus Mundus, for example, or the ERC projects that allows for students from all over the world to come and study in Europe. And I think that's an interesting perspective because it's not just about South Africa and the Netherlands, but it's about the rest of the world, Mundus, for example, and Europe. So the Netherlands can be a start-off point for students, but they can also then go somewhere else. So I think that this bridge building also maybe asks us to open our eyes a bit more broadly to incorporate the European dimension of collaboration. Of course, then there are these institutional agreements that we've also heard Professor de Villiers speak of, which are extremely important because it allows us to do exchange, to set up joint degree programs with talented and bright individual students on PhD level. That's really for us as teachers, that's where that's like visiting the Swedish shop or the toy shop, that's where all the fun really happens and takes place for us as supervisors. That's really the great part of our work, to be able to engage in those kinds of processes. Personal interactions and relationships with colleagues over there and over here, and often in third or fourth locations as well, building consortia with people on projects is extremely helpful and useful and necessary. So the possibilities of bringing people together to sit together and work on projects and not just to email with one another or phone with one another is very important. Then I would just like to say for me personally what collaboration has meant. It has helped me to critically reflect on my own standpoint and position within the university, specifically the South African experience, bringing that to the Netherlands, the Dutch experience, and taking that with me back to South Africa. It expands one's horizon, make you aware of the knowledge that you produce in doing what you do, the ways of doing things, the alternative ways of doing things, looking at the world, how it can look differently depending on the position that you take. Sensitivity towards inclusion and diversity, which is such a big and important topic, and I think in the Netherlands we are really sort of catching a bit of that discussion at the moment and starting to think, so what does that mean for us? But looking at South Africa and how things are being dealt with there, we have so much to learn from the South African context. Then I think some challenges, I was thinking about this, realizing that exchange is not comparable for us here in the Netherlands with maybe other exchange experiences we have with colleagues and students across Europe. I think there are very specific challenges in the exchange between the Netherlands and South Africa. I hope that we will discuss that further, visa applications, etc., etc. To incentivize collaboration, so really to think of how to get the collaboration off the ground. Maybe some top-down work is necessary for us on the ground to start doing things, but what would such incentives mean and how to make sure that everyone is in the know of these opportunities. I think recognizing the enormously unequal economic situation between South Africa and the Netherlands, specifically for students, and what the strong euro against the weak rand means for students to come to the Netherlands, for example, or to other parts in Europe if they are on mobility programs. And to be sensitive about different institutional expectations and practices when we set up these collaborations. Different jargon, different institutional expectations on what certain processes mean or how they should be carried out, different academic cultures and how that sort of pre-programs one in terms of expectations, legal requirements and so forth. And then I think what's also important is to keep the regional embeddedness of both countries in mind, to realize that the Netherlands is part of a broader European context, just as South Africa is part of a broader Southern Africa and African context. And that it's not just about the Netherlands and South Africa, or about Groningen and Stellenbosch, or UvA and Pretoria, but also about that broader context in which we are located and situated.
Thank you very much, Margriet. Then over to Dr. Nicholas, and hearing all the things you want to discuss and looking at the time, it's going to be challenging, because we have until 8 and then 8 Dutch time, and then we have to move on. But thanks for that. Then Dr. Nicholas Clark, currently at TU Delft as a lecturer in heritage and architecture, previously at Pretoria and at Cambridge. Please give us your perspectives.
Thank you very much, Mervyn. I'm going to try and keep it short. I hope everyone can hear me at the back.
Was that long?
No. Good evening, everyone. And I'm just going to try to address two things. We've been speaking about building bridges, but as we've already heard Professor de Villiers saying, the bridges exist. So it's about broadening the bridges or maybe strengthening the bridges. And I was very glad when Professor de Villiers also mentioned postdocs and maybe shared postdocs as a manner to broaden these bridges, but I'd like to focus on my personal experience with the undergrads. When teaching at University of Pretoria, I was involved in my very first student exchange when I took us to, I think it was 12 students, to Zanzibar, to work with students in Zanzibar, documenting the built fabric of Stone Town, the World Heritage Property in Zanzibar. And that was the first time I really saw what this kind of exchange could mean for the development of bachelor and master students. Since then, I've been involved in quite a number of such exchanges, students from Delft coming to Pretoria when I was still there, and once here in Delft, taking students from Delft to Indonesia to work with Indonesian students on Indonesian project problems, not going there only to present ideas, but rather to gain experiences and gain new insights. And often there is an asymmetry in these processes. And this asymmetry has got a lot to do with financial processes, first and foremost, but also about a perspective that people coming from North can teach people in the South how things should be done. That's something I think that needs to be redressed, that we should enter in these agreements on a much stronger bilateral and equal basis, and that we need to find financial means which makes it as useful for Dutch students to go to South Africa and explore challenges and problems in South Africa, as for South African students to come to the Netherlands and explore challenges and problems here. So while there's a lot of focus on the postgraduate space, I'm here actually to say it in Dutch, om een lans te breken, or in other words, to kind of, fight the fight for the undergraduates as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nicholas. Then over to Elvira Fisher, who is linked to Stellenbosch, which I think will be a relief for the alumni in the crowd here after hearing UJ and University of Pretoria speak. Elvira was linked to the Launch Lab in Stellenbosch, where she ended up in the role as incubation director. And before that, you had a long career in financial services, and currently you are in the Netherlands also to pursue the PhD. So lots of perspectives, I think, also from your side. The floor is yours.
Hi everyone. Sure. So I think I'm on the bridge a little bit. So I've also got a few points. So the first point is probably my role as incubation director at Stellenbosch University Launch Lab has allowed me to work with students that take academic learning and the ideas for the world and how to convert that into a business. So to commercialize a business. So in many ways we go to university to learn and to grow, but then we also have so many ways to improve Africa and the rest of the world. And I was lucky to work with students on that level where I teach them sort of the basics of entrepreneurial work, right? So I did that was in collaboration with some of the mentions of Professor Velveers, the agri-tech students, the engineers, the biotech students, and it's quite big sort of innovations that we do at Stellenbosch University, and that needed a home and an entrepreneurial commercialization kind of education. So that's really where my focus has been. Luckily for me, I get to now go and do some more learning on that. So at the Vrije Universiteit, I get to do my PhD, a lifelong dream sort of achieved, and sort of really it's the next step for me. It's not something I necessarily thought of naturally in South Africa to pursue, and I move here and I get the opportunity. So the bridge is really there, and it's really an opportunity to walk across and walk over. And then one last point on exchanges, actually, when I was doing my master's, we did an exchange program. I went over to Germany though, not to the Netherlands, but we learned and we saw how skills in South Africa and in Africa is the same as in Europe. So it was something that inspired me to kind of consider that we are able to contribute and exchange across our different nations and our different countries and institutions. So that's how it kind of led me to being here today. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So there is a bridge. Yeah, I mean, we can broaden it, we can be on it, we can be off it, we can be at one side of the river or the other. For the remainder of the discussion, I think it would be nice to, there's so many topics to focus on. It would be nice to focus on the broader topic of, okay, what do we see as obstacles and solutions. The obstacles can be anything, from immigration rules to funding to lack of mutual learning, but if you name an obstacle, it might also be nice to see what could be a possible solution. And the question is actually open to you in the audience and to the panel and to a director on the screen. Yeah? If you look at the next step in the collaboration between South Africa and the Netherlands in higher education, what can be the solutions to the obstacles that we are seeing? Who would like to take that question? Yeah.
Sorry, I think I'll start off or get the ball rolling by just asking, what would this process be? A student finished their degree at Stellenbosch University, they're looking to do a postgrad. They walk into the Admin A building. What would be the process of getting started? What would be the benefits of doing a part-time or postgrad overseas versus just doing it at Stellenbosch University, where it will be significantly cheaper, for example? So what would you, let's say you do 1 year at Amsterdam, do you get a dual degree? Do you get only a degree from Stellenbosch? And also, what added measures are there to encourage this collaboration?
Great question, and many questions in one, I think. But maybe first on the general advantage of studying abroad, basically, right? That's the question.
Yeah.
I'd like to start. Oh no, we're all using the same mic. I can rather grab this one. There we go. I did my bachelor at UP. In those days it was still a 5-year professional bachelor, so I started in '94 and I qualified in '99. That was the first time I got a piece of paper in my hand. And then I went to Cambridge University in 2004. And I think the biggest lesson I learned from going to study abroad is that the education I received at UP was top-notch. I think that's a very important thing, being able to go elsewhere and reflect on what you have learned, the environment in which you learned it. For me, in any case personally, was very important to build my self-esteem as someone who can operate in the international realm. So maybe that's a first answer to the question why one would want to do it. Of course, the experiences of going to another country, studying there, doing crazy things as a student, because you do those, were also very, very valuable, and those were the best years of my life. something else wants to add.
I would like to add to that. I think indeed one does it because it opens your world, it opens your perspective on the world and shows you how things can be done otherwise, elsewhere. So it makes you, it positions you differently in the world. It makes you more robust, I think, as a person in the world. And then about the collaboration, there are so many flavors in which this ice cream is served. It really depends on the institutional relationships between the two universities. It depends on the topic and the field in which you are doing it. It depends a bit on who you already know and with whom you would like to work together with, the time frame that you have in mind, the stage at which your own proposal is, or are you joining an existing project? Are you sort of recruited to work within a bigger project that's run with other people as well? So there are very many aspects that actually decide or help to make those questions that you've asked a little bit more specific.
Yeah, and maybe that's it. You just have to talk to many people, starting from your own lecturer to the people of the international office and admin, and find your way, because every professor will have different collaborations with different partners in the world. But on a more, let's say, strategic level, it might also be linked to what the director has said. There's more and more interest at the institutional side, if I listen to the director, to build lasting collaborations in joint PhDs or joint postdocs. And maybe, Professor, you can say a little bit more about the strategy behind it and how people can make use of it.
Yeah, thank you very much, and I think that's a very good question. Just coming down to brass tacks now. So, and we've had some good points there from Nicholas and Margriet, and well done, Elvira, on pursuing your PhD. So you can speak to this on a personal level, and just in terms of your interest in innovation, it really ties so well into what Stellenbosch University's Vision 2040 is, which is to be Africa's leading research-intensive university, globally recognized as excellent, inclusive, and innovative, where we advance knowledge in service of society. So we live in a global village now, and we really need to, I've just come from a conference which partly addressed internationalization and in higher education, and we really need to promote this very strongly in the face of increasing nationalism and pseudoscience and etc. So the question is, where should, if a student at Stellenbosch is interested in studying abroad, well, it's not admin A. You go to Stellenbosch University International, which is actually in the building that used to be the Wilcox building, but has now been renamed the Kratua building. All right, so that's Stellenbosch University International. And actually our goal is for every student, every undergraduate student, to have an opportunity at least once during his or her undergraduate career to have the opportunity to go to do a period abroad. Very much, I liked what Margriet also talked about. It's we're emphasis on a south-north partnership. So we have examples of trilateral arrangements with Stellenbosch University, Makerere University, and at Karolinska Institute, and we're also members of the African Research Universities Alliance, which is a group of 16 or so research-intensive universities. But the other points that just two examples where it's absolutely critical that our students do go abroad is we have a BCom International Studies program that started 3 years or so ago. And it's a 4-year program, and there's a 6 months mandatory period where these students have to go overseas and have internships with some or other international company and part of this BCom International Studies. Similarly, what we've, of course now in COVID, we're all trying to go more hybrid and online and distance learning, etc. We started a master's in engineering management program this year. We thought it's hybrid, but predominantly online, but also there's some periods of residential experience at Stellenbosch University. We thought that we'd get about 25, people or so that to make this program break even. We got 150 who signed up, 150 from all over the world, and a lot of them alumni, a lot of them South Africans. So there's a huge thirst for and this is clearly a niche that was identified in engineering management, a master's degree in that. So that's also an example of why these cross-cultural experiences are so important in terms of funding. So it is interesting that, as I said, we want our students to have this opportunity, but yet most of them, they want to go to Europe, they want to go to the UK, they want to go to North America. We actually have a number of scholarships that are not used to China and also to Russia. Now, Russia is maybe not the right example to use at this time, but also South America. So and the African continent, these other partner institutions. So especially if we can get some of our preferred institutional partners like KU Leuven, Ghent, and soon to be Groningen, if both institutions put some skin in the game, it becomes much more affordable. To be quite honest, I think for somebody to do a postdoc in South Africa, that is a fantastic experience and very affordable. The euro goes a long way.
Thank you, thank you very much. When we talk about the next step or obstacles, we also some terms that always come in mind are brain drain or decolonization. And if I say these words, what do they mean? Maybe first quickly to the panelists, and can you reflect a little bit on these items?
Maybe a little bit of my personal experience. So when I applied for the PhD role, initially you think, from a confidence perspective, what would I be able to contribute to a PhD study in Europe, no less, at a university in Amsterdam. But I walked out of that interview process or that session with the panel, and I said to my partner, my husband, that if anything, I was authentic, I was real, I explained what I knew, I explained what I'm curious about, and I explained what I'm, want to explore. And when I got the call back to say, it's you, we chose you, I realized there was something I had that I had learned in all my years in South Africa, in corporate and working within the university and all my studies, that I can contribute to that faculty at the Universiteit. So for me, it was not necessarily a consideration of the brain drain as they talk about it, but it was about the brain exchange for me and a little bit around how I can bring what I now know into a new world that I'm also trying to get to know. And there was value in that exchange. And in entrepreneurial speak, if there's value, there's money to be made. So bring it on. But that would be my take on it. Yeah.
Mutual learning. Yeah, that's,
Indeed. There's something there.
All right. I'm not an entrepreneur yet, but I think I can learn. I think the brain drain issue and the exchange issue are actually two different things. And when I had completed my master's in the UK, I went back to South Africa and I started working there. And a master's student of mine in South Africa came to the Netherlands for a period at Eindhoven through the Stichting Studiefonds, and is my replacement in South Africa after I left for personal reasons. He's taken over the courses, etc., that I used to teach, and he's there now, and bringing his very valuable experience from Eindhoven to Pretoria. So I think that when it comes to exchange, exchange could actually also show people that the world is very much the same no matter where you go. And it would kind of pop the bubble of Europe and maybe even counter people wanting to leave South Africa, because they'll realize what a fantastic place it is to be.
Yeah, that's a difficult question, and I listen with great interest to what you are saying here. I think that the brain drain, of course, in countries where skills are very very much needed. It's crucial, it's important to think of ways of keeping people who have been subsidized in various ways by the government to retain that knowledge and those skills within the country. But I also think that perhaps some of our thinking is limited or locked in as it is in a kind of silo thinking that sees knowledge almost as a kind of protected market kind of thing. We tend to see where we are as, I often get the question, so you've left South Africa, but where are you located now, or where do you feel at home? This idea that you can only be at one place at a time, and that you cannot be, of course you cannot physically be here and there together, but I think that we live in such a transnational world at the moment with hybrid connections, having discussions with each other online, despite the 12,000 kilometer distance between us. So I think that there is much in the exchange and collaboration that is facilitated by all kinds of technological possibilities that we have these days that can in some way address the brain drain. The other question about decolonization, what I've learned from exchange with South Africa and collaboration with partners is how much we have to learn and that we should and can learn from working with South African partners. And there is a tendency, I think, to maybe with some colleagues or certain areas, a sort of a mistaken idea that, well, we can help, or we will provide some capacity building when we do the work together. Those days are over. I think really if those of us thinking like that back at the European universities have been sleeping, and it's time for them to wake up.
That's a very strong and good statement, I think, Margriet. If we go on with the expats, you said, Nicholas, in the pre-discussion we had, South Africa should start looking at expats as a resource. Yeah? And I also know from other countries I've worked in and with that their diaspora is very often embraced, also by the government, to use them to make further connections. Is that something that we can also see as a future for South Africa, and especially looking at the alumni here? If you talk about the bridge as something how we can look at the relation, and you are the bridge, right? You are the people that are in between the Netherlands and South Africa that are here now but have strong roots with Stellenbosch. How can you play a role in being a resource in furthering the relation and in also developing your own countries further? There's somebody at the back there, yeah. Maybe you can walk to the middle, and I also saw a hand from the rector, so we also have to get back to him.
So thank you. My name is Heinrich Mathieu. I think on the government issue, we should realize that governments differ, and in the case of South Africa at this stage, I think it's a bit like Reagan, who said the main problem is once the government comes to your door and says, I have a solution for you. So I think we should organize it within the institution, academic independence and autonomy, using the networks and the businesses that are there. And of course in South Africa there are also community institutions in Xhosa speaking, Zulu speaking, Afrikaans speaking communities. So and linked to the academia. So I think that would be at least an alternative consideration. Should be. My question to Professor Velveers is actually regarding the dual co-doctorates and those from Europe. Based on your experience, what incentivizes people to do that from the European side?
Yeah, so thank you very much, and Heinrich, it's good to hear from you, and I read your columns in the Burger with great interest every now and again. So well done on that. So with regard to and I'll come to your question now. With regard to the diaspora brain drain issue, I think one needs to be, and I like Margriet's answer there as well. I think one's got to be careful not to overstate that. The world has become a small place, and we, as I mentioned, that Stellenbosch is a research-intensive university. So the research that we do is of threefold. It is of local relevance, it's regionally impactful, but it's globally competitive. We are globally competitive. We don't want handouts, as Margriet said. We really don't want handouts. We compete on an equal footing. More than 50% of the university's total budget now are research contracts, of which 75% are international. So it's NIH, it's Gates Foundation, it's Wellcome Trust, it's Horizon Europe, etc., etc. So that would be the reason why it would be interesting for European students to pursue a part-time or joint PhD in South Africa, because the issues that we deal with here are very, very relevant, not only locally, but also, and it's globally, these are what John Cowell calls the wicked problems. It's the complex problems that we all need to address, and that universities are particularly well suited to address. I speak about the four horsemen of the apocalypse: poverty, unemployment, inequality, and also corruption that we need to deal with as difficult issues. And just on a personal note, I mean, I'm a gastroenterologist. I'm your worst enemy. You're the worst doctor you can think about. If you're above the age of 50, you need a colonoscopy. That was my free medical advice for tonight. Is that you know, I went to I studied at Stellenbosch. I went to Oxford, and I got an opportunity to go to America, and I thought I'd have a quick 18-month American experience, and I stayed for 18 years. So I was overseas for 22 years, and then got an opportunity to come back to South Africa. So the point that I really want to make to the alumni tonight as well is that you're already doing a very important thing for Stellenbosch University. It's what I call the 3 T's. The 3 T's is, first, you're providing some time here. You're spending some time with your alumni. The second one is talent. Are these connections. We now have a massive network on LinkedIn. More than 100,000 of our alumni are on LinkedIn, and that's that network you spoke about, providing jobs, advice, and also sharing talent and mentorship. And then later on, I am going to get to you with regard to treasure. All right, don't forget about the treasure part as well. But I really I want to thank you all for the fantastic job that you're doing, and for the interest that you show in your alma mater. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I will get back to you in a second for some closing remarks, Mr. De Velveers. But maybe also to the alumni. You've heard the discussions. You've heard the encouragement of your rector as well to play a role, to become active. Anybody wants to reflect on that? How do you see your role in developing the relationship between, I don't know, Stellenbosch and partner institutions, between the Netherlands and South Africa in general, or specifically in higher education? Or do you have any questions to the panel? Any of these will do. Yeah.
Thank you. Sorry, I'll come up. Hi everyone. Sorry, my name's Karen Smith, and I'm a Stellenbosch alumna, and I'm based at Leiden University. And so my question is, I think there's always a puzzle. You know, how do you do these things? How do you promote academic exchange? Because there's the one way of doing it, which is just existing, you know, relationships, academic, personal, and otherwise. And I think that's the way most people do it. I do see that from a strategic perspective, you know, it's in the interest of universities to try and promote this also from kind of top-down level. And I wonder what could be done, because if I think, you know, my practical experience as an academic, I personally would love to have, you know, to do more in terms of interactions with South Africa, but I don't have the time. My institution does not provide me any incentives to do that. And so I'm wondering if there's something that could be done, you know, at that level, kind of at that, you know, if you interact with the Vice Chancellor or the Rector of Leiden University, you know, to talk about that as being part of, I don't know, you know, community service, all these things that are supposedly becoming more important. So that's one thing I wanted to ask, perhaps. The second is, I think there are a number of academics, just I know from my personal network, who were at Stellenbosch or who completed their PhDs at Stellenbosch and are now either in the Netherlands or somewhere else. And I'm thinking that maybe that's something for Alison to do as well, to create a kind of special, subsection of the alumni network for Stellenbosch academics based overseas. So that's just 5 cents for my perspective. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anybody wants to reflect on that first part of the question? How can she get involved? Yeah.
So a little bit what we did in the incubator, we needed to always find someone more experienced or someone more skilled that would invest in a young entrepreneur or a student wanting to become an entrepreneur. And we would reach out to the alumni and we would say, come along on the journey with us. It's only 12 weeks and invest 1 to 2 hours of your time, because more likely you have something to share with that young graduate in the industry that they are relevant in. So for example, I mentored a young biotech team, and their mentor was one of the professors at one of the Netherlands universities, and he joined us in the program, for example, over the 12-week journey. So it was an exchange and an enriching exchange for, I suppose, a professor, also spending time with a young student and a young graduate who's got all these big ideas on how to solve big complex problems. But also at the same time, entrepreneurship is about building networks and helping that young student to build new networks. And he had so much to give, so easily as well. He had coffee with everyone that she needed to meet. So it's a little bit about investment for me, and also, again, leaning in on our alumni in many ways to provide that database of who needs what and when. So that's my thoughts.
Yeah, but I recognize what you say so much. When? How? There's never enough money, there's never enough time. But I think for me, really personal relationships, investing, as Alara said, investing time in creating personal relationships with colleagues whose work you find interesting, who you've heard speaking at a conference, and starting a conversation with them and then taking it from there. It's a slow process, and it is a process that takes a long time. It's difficult, I think, to just set up something and run with it. But starting with that personal interaction with someone whose work you find interesting, and then small projects, small steps.
And just the last thing that I can add is finding funding is one of the major obstacles.
Yeah.
And yes, there are all the normal funding processes that you can go through, but there are also some very interesting other ones small ones that you can find out through your network. Mervyn, I'm thinking, for instance, of the Dutch government's International Heritage Program, through which I've undertaken quite a number of projects. So that's very niche, of course. It's dealing with built heritage. But through networks as well, you start finding different sources of funding, which, if you pile them all together, bikkies maak baie, my mom always says.
Yeah, travel grants. Universities usually have sort of ad hoc individual travel grants available that are not specifically used for bigger programs or things like that. My university is called Marco Polo for outside of Europe, and Erasmus Plus for inside Europe.
And as somebody who drafts these central top-down strategies, we are always trying to build in exactly those elements. Yes, travel grants for individuals to initiate bottom-up activities as well. Okay, we're running out of time, unfortunately. Is there any final question from somebody from the floor, from one of the alumni? Yeah, Professor De Velveers, do you still have time for?
Yep.
Yeah,
I'm good. Yep. I'm good.
Say something quickly, otherwise Alison will not forgive me. Thank you to the panel, and good evening, Professor Velveers. So I'm Sarah Rasmus, based at Wageningen University. I'm in the Food Quality Design Group, currently assistant professor. And I just want to say that if I didn't have the funding, for instance, with the skills program during my master's, and from South Africa during my PhD, then I wouldn't have been where I am at the moment. And that's why you have these bridges in place. And that's because you have to build that network, and then when you reach, for instance, if you apply, in my case, for a postdoc, then they already know your name, and the chance of you actually then getting in is higher. So Funding is at the moment a big issue for me standing now as assistant professor, really wanting to give other South Africans that opportunity. I find it really difficult, but we are working on it. I just tell them, just be on the lookout for opportunities and you try to make it work. Yeah, that's just what I'll say. Thanks.
Thanks for that, very, very valuable. Professor de Velveers, do you mind if I give the floor to you for some closing remarks from your side on the topics that we discussed tonight?
Yeah, thank you very much, Mervyn, and I won't be long. I know I'm standing between you and some more wine and canapes. So, but thanks for the opportunity, and thanks to the panel members for their insights. And again, I'm really sorry that I can't be there. But I think that the question regarding academic exchanges and the nature thereof, it is pertinent. So you can have both a top-down approach and a bottoms-up approach. The top-down approach is where we have partnerships with more than 100 institutions worldwide, and some of these MOUs and so on, they gather dust, and they're not really active as much. And so that's why we've instead we did a very thorough analysis of which of these partnerships are actually active and yielding positive results in terms of collaborations, published papers, joint funding, etc., etc. And so that we've narrowed down to about 20 partners, and that's where we really put a lot of effort into cultivating those. So that's top down, and that's where, to speak to Professor Smith's experience, is where both the leadership or the management of both institutions make it important for academics, where it's to their advantageous to them to pursue such a exchange program. It's important for promotion. We all want to be promoted, and we only have so many hours in the day. And these exchanges should not be onerous, they should be fun. And that is where the bottoms-up approach comes in. And what I've witnessed in some of the best examples is where you meet at an international conference, you meet at the poster session, you start talking with another academic, and wow, that is interesting. Oh, what did you know about this? And then before you know it, these collaborations start. You start sharing some students, you start producing some papers together, and you apply for funding, and lo and behold, there it grows. And that's fun, and it's part of the benefit. So just in closing, thank you so much all for attending. We talked about this bridge. This bridge is already existing, but it would be wonderful to turn this bridge into a 6-lane highway like they have in LA, and I very much look forward to seeing you all in person very soon.
Hopefully a highway with sustainable electric cars on it, right? Then let me close formally. Thanks a lot to the Zuid-Afrikahuis Nederland for hosting this session. Thanks a million to Jamie and Alison for organizing it all. I think a big round of applause. Thanks to my excellent panel. Thanks a lot for being here and for giving great input. And last but not least, thanks to the alumni for being here, for, what did he say, giving your time tonight, yeah? Being so talented, and hopefully in the future for Stellenbosch also giving your treasures to Stellenbosch. Thank you. Professor de Velveers, can we, as the panel, take a selfie with you? Otherwise my kids at home won't believe that I was on a panel with the rector.
Yeah, it's a real selfie.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
All right. Much appreciated.
And now we would like to invite everybody back to the...
Enjoy the wine.